Solo, a Star Wars story, is directed by Ron Howard and stars Alden Ehrenreich, who plays Han Solo, and this is the second film in the anthology series for Star Wars. Solo takes place in between episodes 3 and 4, where the character Han Solo goes on a mission with a team in order to help pay off a debt while also completing unfinished business. I was genuinely excited to see this movie. I know a lot of people did not really want this film to even be made, but for me, I really love the character Han Solo. He is one of my favorite characters, not just Star Wars, but the history of cinema. He is one of the greatest characters I've ever known on the big screen. So I was automatically really excited to watch this movie, and it was one of my most anticipated of the year. It does kind of suck, though, that Harrison Ford could not reprise his role as Han Solo, but it makes sense because this is supposed to be a younger version of Han Solo than we know from the original trilogy, and Harrison Ford is in his 70s now, so it makes no sense you have to recast the role. Since I just mentioned how there had to be recasting for the character Han Solo, let me get into what I thought about Alden Ehrenreich's portrayal of Han Solo, and I thought he did a pretty good job. He followed a lot of Han Solo's character traits, and he also did feel like a younger version of Han Solo. I know there were several people out there that thought he didn't do the greatest job. They could have gotten somebody better. There's also people out there that felt this movie should have never been made because Harrison Ford is the only person, in their opinion, that should be playing Han Solo. But for me personally, I was completely fine with Alden Ehrenreich's portrayal as his character. I think he did a fine job, and I like the guy. I hope to see him more in movies in the future. One of the main problems a lot of people had going into this movie and were worried about was the fact that there were reshoots and the original directors were fired by Kathleen Kennedy because there were apparently differences among the direction of this film. So then came in Ron Howard, who really, I don't know if he directed the entire movie, probably parts of it. So this is basically a shared directing movie. Being completely honest though, from beginning to end in this film, I could not even tell that there was a directing change or reshoots for this film. It all flowed very well, and I thought they did a good job at covering that all up. I was looking forward to being entertained, and that's what happened for me with this film. I was pretty much pleased in terms of entertainment factor. This film was able to accomplish the adventure factor more so than a film like Rogue One, and I have to give credit to Ron Howard and the other original directors. They did a good job in making this movie feel one as a whole, and the adventure was really well found in this movie. From the start of this film, I was enthralled with the origin story elements for the character of Han Solo, such as where he got his gun from, where he came from, how he got his last name, and how he met Chewbacca. I enjoyed all of those scenes. Those pieces of the movie were easily some of the best parts of the entire film. The movie would not be the same if it did not have those elements. But we cannot forget about Donald Glover, who played Lando Calrissian, a recasting as well of that character, a younger version, and he also killed it in this movie. Donald Glover is so talented as a singer, as an actor. This guy can do it all. He has never disappointed in any role. I thought he did great as his character, did everything I needed him to do as Lando Calrissian. I have to say, it's great that we finally were able to see on the screen what both Han Solo and Lando were talking about in the original trilogy. That was really satisfying. Plus, a few plot twists this movie had to offer caught me off guard. I did hear a few people say that it was pretty much predictable, and yes, the movie does get a tad bit predictable at the end, but nonetheless, there were definitely a few things that I did not expect, and I enjoyed those elements too. I did have fun for the most part with Solo, a Star Wars story. I saw it on Saturday night, so I was a little bit late. I heard some reviews already, and I know this is a movie that has divided audiences, just like The Last Jedi, and that's completely fine. Every Star Wars movie is probably going to do that from here on out. I would say this is, at worst, a fun Star Wars movie. Very enjoyable. I was entertained for the most part. There were a couple times where the movie did drag, so that brings me into a couple of negatives. There is this giant epic scene involving all of the characters inside the Millennium Falcon, and the film felt like it was slowing down a bit, and this scene certainly overstayed its welcome. The movie would have been better had they decided to cut down on the time with that scene because I'm not gonna lie, I got a little bit bored at times with this film's pacing. It was somewhat slow. On top of that, I do believe some characters were underutilized. They could have done so much more with a few that I liked from the beginning, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, what are they gonna do with this character now? Well, that was a waste of time. They could have done so much more with that person. They had more potential, and that also goes with this film's villains, because personally, I did not really care about any of the villains in this movie. They were pretty boring, bland, had no backstory, no depth, were just there to be bad. I didn't really expect too much from the villains, though. This was more of a movie about Han Solo and his story. I wanted to know a lot more about where he came from and how he became the guy he is in the original trilogy, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. The villains weren't great. They didn't hit for this movie in particular. Last but not least, the cinematography is a bit too dark throughout this movie. In some action scenes, I could not quite pick out what was happening, so it would have been much nicer had the movie been more colorful, lighter. I would have liked that so much more, and even my friend who I saw it with was saying the same thing. So it would have made a much more logical choice had they decided to not go with more of a darker tone in terms of the cinematography. That was a bit off-putting for myself. That pretty much concludes all the non-spoiler points I have for Solo: A Star Wars Story. This is a movie that I think will probably be a little bit worse the second time I watch it. There isn't too much rewatchability with this movie as there is with the other films in the Star Wars universe, but like I said, I still had a really good time with this film, and I think I'd rather watch this over that of Black Panther. I think it's also a better movie, in my opinion, so that says something. I'm gonna give Solo: A Star Wars Story a 75%. It's unfortunate that a lot of people, once again, are divided on this film, but that is expected because a lot of people didn't really want this movie to be made after all, considering that Harrison Ford did not reprise his role as Han Solo, so that was already pretty much expected from most people. However, I did enjoy this movie. I think it's a fun time. Maybe it doesn't have the rewatchability as the other Star Wars films we have in the universe today, but it's still a pretty good time. I definitely recommend watching it over the next week. Plus, perhaps the Kathleen Kennedy, Ron Howard, and Disney themselves, they were able to make this movie flow so well despite all the reshoots and the directing change. That was a job well done. So if you guys happen to see Solo: A Star Wars Story, let me know down below in the comment section what your opinion is on it. Because I just saw Solo: A Star Wars Story this past weekend, I feel like it's right for me to update my rankings of all 10 of the Star Wars movies. That video will come out later this week. If you are new to my channel, click that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.